Marcus Iron Fist Rodriguez had never lost a fight. Not in the underground boxing rings of Detroit. Not in the military training camps of Fort Bragg. Not even the brutal street fights that had earned him his reputation as the most feared warrior in 3 states. At 6 feet 4 inches and 250 pounds of solid muscle, he was a walking mountain of destruction. His hands were registered weapons, his body a temple of violence, and his mind a tactical computer programmed for one thing: victory at any cost. The crowd at Jimmy's underground arena roared as Marcus stepped into the makeshift ring. The warehouse smelled of sweat, blood, and desperation. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows across the concrete floor. This was not sanctioned boxing. This was raw, primal combat where men came to prove their worth and often left with more than bruised egos. Ladies and gentlemen, Jimmy's voice cracked through the microphone feedback. In the red corner, weighing in at 250 pounds, with a record of 47 wins and 0 losses, the undefeated champion of underground fighting, Iron Fist Rodriguez. Marcus raised his gloved hands, his scarred face showing no emotion. The crowd erupted in a mixture of cheers and boos. Some loved him for his dominance. Others hated him for making their favorite fighters look like amateurs. He didn't care about their opinions. He cared about one thing: maintaining his perfect record. His opponent tonight was Big Mike Thompson, a former heavyweight boxer who had fallen from grace after a scandal involving performance-enhancing drugs. Mike stood 6 feet 2 inches and weighed 230 pounds. He was dangerous, experienced, and desperate to rebuild his reputation. The bookmakers had him as a serious contender, but Marcus knew better. He had studied Mike's fight videos for weeks, memorizing every pattern, every weakness, every tell that would give him the advantage he needed. The referee, a grizzled ex-fighter named Tony, called both men to the center of the ring. "You know the rules, gentlemen. No weapons, no biting, no eye gouging. Fight until one man can't continue or taps out. May the best warrior win." Marcus bumped gloves with Mike, looking directly into his opponent's eyes. He saw fear there, barely concealed behind a mask of false confidence. Good. Fear made men sloppy, and sloppy fighters made easy victories. The bell rang, and the 2 men began circling each other. Marcus moved with surprising grace for a man his size, his feet dancing across the canvas with the precision of years of training. He had started fighting at age 12 when his father, a former Marine drill sergeant, decided his son needed to learn how to defend himself in their rough neighborhood. What began as self-defense lessons had evolved into an obsession with combat excellence. Mike threw the first punch, a powerful right cross aimed at Marcus's jaw. Marcus slipped the punch effortlessly, countering with a devastating left hook to Mike's ribs. The sound of knuckles meeting flesh echoed through the warehouse, and Mike stumbled backward, already winded. "Come on, Mike," someone shouted from the crowd. "Don't let him intimidate you." But intimidation was exactly what Marcus specialized in. He pressed his advantage, unleashing a series of combinations that sent Mike reeling. A right uppercut to the solar plexus doubled Mike over, and Marcus followed up with a knee strike that would have been illegal in regulated boxing, but was perfectly acceptable in this underground arena. Mike crashed to the canvas, blood streaming from his nose. The crowd counted along with the referee. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Mike struggled to his feet at the count of 8, swaying dangerously. Marcus knew the fight was over, but the rules required him to continue until his opponent couldn't get up or surrendered. He moved in for the finish, his fists like hammers striking an anvil. The final blow was a perfectly executed right cross that sent Mike into unconsciousness before he hit the ground. The crowd exploded in noise, some celebrating the spectacular knockout, others mourning their lost bets. Marcus stood over his fallen opponent, not even breathing hard, his perfect record intact. 48-0, Jimmy announced. Iron Fist Rodriguez remains undefeated. As medical personnel attended to Mike, Marcus collected his winnings and headed toward the exit. This was routine for him now. Find an opponent, study their weaknesses, execute his game plan, and collect his money. He had it down to a science, and science didn't lie. He was simply better than everyone else. Outside the warehouse, Detroit's night air carried the sounds of distant sirens and urban decay. Marcus walked to his motorcycle, a custom Harley-Davidson that rumbled like thunder when he started the engine. As he prepared to leave, a small figure approached him from the shadows. "Excuse me, Mr. Rodriguez." Marcus turned to see a young woman, maybe 5 feet 4 inches tall, and couldn't have weighed more than 120 pounds. She had short dark hair, intelligent brown eyes, and wore simple jeans and a black t-shirt. Nothing about her appearance suggested she belonged in this world of violence and brutality. "You're Marcus Rodriguez, right? The underground fighter they call Iron Fist." "Depends who's asking," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being in control of every situation. "My name is Sophia Chun. I've been watching your fights for the past 6 months. I'm impressed with your technique, but I think there might be some gaps in your training that you're not aware of." Marcus almost laughed. This tiny woman was critiquing his fighting skills. He had trained with some of the best martial artists in the world. He had military combat experience. He had never lost a fight in his entire life. What could this girl possibly teach him? "Listen, sweetheart," he said, not unkindly, but with clear dismissal. "I appreciate your interest, but I don't think you understand what level I'm operating at. I just finished my 48th consecutive victory. I don't lose fights." Sophia nodded thoughtfully. "That's exactly why I wanted to talk to you. Your success has come from being bigger, stronger, and more experienced than your opponents. But what happens when you face someone who doesn't rely on those advantages?" "Won't happen," Marcus said confidently. "Size and strength matter in fighting. It's basic physics. I'm about 40 pounds and 6 inches on most men who step into a ring with me. Combined with my training and experience, it's an unbeatable combination. Mind if I show you something?" Sophia asked. Marcus checked his watch. It was past midnight, and he had a training session scheduled for the next morning. But something about this woman's quiet confidence intrigued him. She didn't seem intimidated by his reputation or his physical presence. In his experience, people were either afraid of him or trying to use his reputation for their own benefit. Sophia seemed to be neither. "What did you have in mind?" "Just a simple demonstration. Nothing serious, nothing that would interfere with your training schedule. I promise it will only take 3 seconds. Marcus found himself curious despite his better judgment. 3 seconds? What could anyone possibly accomplish in 3 seconds against him? He had reflexes honed by years of combat training. His reaction time was measured in fractions of seconds. The idea that this small woman could do anything significant in such a brief window seemed absurd. 3 seconds, he agreed. "But if this is some kind of publicity stunt, or if you're trying to set me up for something, you picked the wrong guy." Sophia smiled, and for the first time, Marcus noticed something in her expression that made him slightly uneasy. It wasn't fear or nervousness. It was the look of someone who knew something he didn't. "No publicity stunt," she assured him. "Just one fighter showing another fighter something they might find interesting. Are you ready?" Marcus set his feet in a basic fighting stance, his hands raised in a defensive position. He had faced surprise attacks before, and his military training had taught him to expect the unexpected. Whatever Sophia had planned, he was confident he could handle it. "Whenever you're ready," he said. Sophia took a step forward, and Marcus tensed, preparing for whatever unconventional attack she might attempt. He had seen small fighters try to use speed and agility to overcome size disadvantages before. He had faced wrestlers who relied on technique over strength. He had even fought a few martial artists who incorporated exotic techniques from various disciplines. None of them had been successful. But as Sophia moved, something in Marcus's mind registered that this was different. Her movement was unlike anything he had encountered before. It wasn't the aggressive charge of a brawler or the calculated advance of a boxer. It was something else entirely, something that seemed to bypass every defensive system his brain had developed over years of fighting experience. In the first second, Sophia's movement brought her inside Marcus's guard before he could react. His hands moved to intercept her, but she seemed to anticipate his defensive response and flowed around it like water around a rock. In the second, Marcus felt something happen to his balance that defied his understanding of physics and leverage. Despite his size advantage and solid stance, he found himself being manipulated in a way that made resistance impossible. It wasn't violent or forceful. It was almost gentle, like being caught in an invisible current. The third second ended with Marcus flat on his back on the concrete pavement, staring up at the night sky, completely unable to comprehend what had just happened to him. Sophia stood beside him, not even breathing hard, offering him a hand up. 3 seconds, she said quietly. Marcus accepted her help getting to his feet, his mind racing to process what he had just experienced. In 48 professional fights, hundreds of training sessions, and countless street encounters, nothing like this had ever happened to him. He had been completely outmaneuvered by someone half his size without understanding how or why. "What the hell was that?" he asked, genuinely bewildered. "That was jiu-jitsu," Sophia replied. Specifically, it was a demonstration of how technique and timing can overcome size and strength when applied correctly. "You're an excellent fighter, Mr. Rodriguez, but your training is focused on fighting people who fight the same way you do. You've become very good at playing a game where the rules favor your natural advantages." Marcus was still trying to process what had happened. His entire identity was built around being the toughest, strongest, most skilled fighter in any room. His reputation, his livelihood, his sense of self-worth were all tied to his ability to dominate other people in physical confrontations. And this woman had just demonstrated that there were aspects of fighting he had never even considered. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked. "I've been training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu since I was 8 years old," Sophia explained. "My grandfather was one of the original students of the Gracie family when they first brought their art to the United States. He taught my father, who taught me. I've been competing internationally since I was 16. Why haven't I heard of you?" "Because jiu-jitsu competition doesn't get the same attention as boxing or mixed martial arts. Most people don't even know it exists. But every serious fighter should understand at least the basics because it teaches you how to deal with opponents who don't play by the same rules you're used to." Marcus looked at Sophia with new respect. She wasn't just some random person trying to make a name for herself by confronting a famous fighter. She was a legitimate martial artist with skills he had never encountered before. "Would you be willing to teach me?" he asked. Sophia studied his face for a moment, as if evaluating whether his interest was genuine. Training in jiu-jitsu requires a different mindset than what you're used to. In your current fighting style, you rely on being the bigger, stronger person. In jiu-jitsu, you have to learn to accept being in inferior positions and work your way out of them through technique and patience. It's not about dominating your opponent through force. It's about understanding leverage, timing, and human anatomy. "I'm willing to learn," Marcus said. "What you just showed me, I need to understand how it works." "Are you sure?" "Because learning jiu-jitsu means spending a lot of time being submitted by people smaller than you, including women, teenagers, and older men who weigh 50 pounds less than you do. Your ego is going to take a beating before your skills improve." Marcus thought about this. His entire life had been about being the alpha, the dominant force in any physical confrontation. The idea of repeatedly losing to smaller, weaker opponents was not appealing. But the demonstration Sophia had just given him proved that his understanding of fighting was incomplete. "My grandfather used to say that a true warrior is someone who never stops learning," Sophia continued. "The moment you think you know everything is the moment you become vulnerable to someone who knows something you don't. Are you a true warrior, or are you just someone who's been lucky enough to be bigger and stronger than his opponents?" The question stung because it forced Marcus to confront an uncomfortable truth. His success had come primarily from his natural physical advantages combined with solid but conventional training. He had never been tested against someone who fought from a completely different paradigm. "I want to learn," he said firmly. "When can we start?" Sophia smiled. Tomorrow morning. But I should warn you that my grandfather's school doesn't cater to egos. Everyone starts as a white belt, regardless of their experience in other martial arts. You'll be training alongside housewives, college students, and kids who will be able to submit you for the first several months. Are you prepared for that? Marcus nodded. I think tonight proved that I need to be prepared for a lot of things I haven't considered before. Good answer. Meet me at Dragon's Den Academy tomorrow at 6 a.m. Wear comfortable clothes that you don't mind getting stretched and stained. And Mr. Rodriguez. Yes. Leave your ego in the parking lot. You're going to need to check it every morning before you walk through our doors. As Sophia walked away into the night, Marcus stood alone in the parking lot, his perfect record intact but his confidence shaken. For the first time in his adult life, he had encountered something he didn't understand, someone he couldn't intimidate, and a challenge that couldn't be overcome through brute force. He started his motorcycle and rode home through the empty streets of Detroit, his mind replaying those 3 seconds over and over again. How had she done it? What had he missed? What other gaps existed in his knowledge that he wasn't even aware of? By the time he reached his apartment, Marcus had made a decision that would change the trajectory of his life. He was going to learn everything Sophia could teach him, no matter how long it took or how much his pride suffered in the process. Because if there was one thing worse than losing a fight, it was the possibility of losing a fight due to his own ignorance. The undefeated warrior was about to discover that true strength came not from never falling down, but from the willingness to get back up and learn from every fall. And his education was about to begin with a 5'4" woman who had just redefined everything he thought he knew about combat, competition, and himself. Marcus arrived at Dragon's Den Academy at 5:45 a.m., 15 minutes early, because military training had taught him that being on time meant being late. The building was an old converted warehouse in a neighborhood that had seen better days, but the exterior gave no indication of what lay inside. A simple sign by the door read Dragon's Den Academy, traditional martial arts in both English and what appear to be Chinese characters. The interior surprised him. Instead of the flashy equipment and mirrors he expected from a modern gym, the space was simple and functional. Mats covered most of the floor, with a few heavy bags hanging from the ceiling beams. The walls were lined with framed photographs showing various martial artists in action, some dating back decades. The smell of cleaning solution and honest sweat permeated the air. Sophia was already there, wearing a white uniform with a black belt tied around her waist. She was stretching on the mats alongside an elderly Asian man whom Marcus assumed must be her grandfather. Despite his advanced age, the old man moved with a fluid grace that suggested years of dedicated practice. "Mr. Rodriguez," Sophia called out, "I'd like you to meet my grandfather, Master Chun Wei." "Sifu Chun, this is the fighter I told you about." Master Chun approached Marcus with measured steps, his dark eyes taking in every detail of the big man's appearance. He was probably in his 70s, maybe 5 feet 6 inches tall, and couldn't have weighed more than 140 pounds. But something in his bearing commanded immediate respect. "So you're the one who has never lost a fight," Master Chun said, his English heavily accented, but perfectly clear. "Sophia tells me you are interested in learning why size and strength are not always enough." "Yes, sir. What your granddaughter showed me last night. I need to understand how it works." Master Chun nodded thoughtfully. Understanding and learning are different things. Understanding requires only the mind. Learning requires the mind, the body, and the spirit to work together. Are you prepared to use all three? "I think so, sir." Thinking and knowing are also different things. We will discover which one applies to you. Master Chun gestured toward a rack of white uniforms. "Sophia will show you how to tie your belt. In this school, everyone begins at the same level, regardless of what they have accomplished elsewhere." Marcus changed into the white uniform, which felt strange after years of fighting in shorts and no shirt. Sophia helped him tie the white belt, explaining the proper way to wrap it around his waist and create the traditional knot. "The belt represents your journey," she explained. "White is the beginning, when you know nothing. Each color after that represents different stages of knowledge and skill. But remember, the belt doesn't make you a fighter. The training does. Other students began arriving as the morning progressed. Marcus was surprised by the diversity of the group. There was Jennifer, a nurse in her 30s who had started training for self-defense. Miguel, a college student studying engineering who wanted to learn discipline and focus. Sarah, a high school student whose parents had enrolled her to build confidence. And David, a man in his 50s who had taken up martial arts after retirement to stay active and healthy. None of them looked particularly intimidating, which made Marcus wonder what he could possibly learn from training with them. But he remembered Sophia's demonstration from the night before and decided to keep an open mind. Today we will work on basic positions and movements, Sophia announced to the class. Mr. Rodriguez, since you're new, you'll partner with me for the first few techniques. The class began with stretching and basic movements that seemed deceptively simple. Sophia demonstrated how to fall properly, roll safely, and maintain balance while moving in various directions. Marcus thought these exercises were beneath his level until Sophia asked him to demonstrate a forward roll. What should have been a simple movement turned into an embarrassing display of clumsiness. Marcus's size and muscle mass worked against him, making the roll awkward and poorly controlled. He ended up off balance and disoriented, while Jennifer, the nurse, executed the same movement with perfect grace despite being half his size. Rolling teaches you how to maintain awareness and control even when your body is in motion, Sophia explained patiently. In fighting, you don't always get to stay on your feet in an ideal position. Sometimes you fall, sometimes you're thrown, sometimes you choose to go to the ground tactically. Knowing how to move safely and effectively in all positions is essential. The next hour was a humbling experience for Marcus. Every technique that Sophia demonstrated required a combination of balance, timing, and spatial awareness that his previous training hadn't developed. He was used to fighting while standing up, using his reach and power to keep opponents at a distance. This training required him to work in close contact, often in positions where his size actually made things more difficult. When they practiced basic grappling positions, Marcus found himself completely out of his element. Sophia showed him how to maintain guard position while on his back, how to escape from various holds, and how to apply leverage to control an opponent's movement. None of it felt natural or intuitive. The key is to stop thinking like a boxer, Sophia explained as she easily escaped from what Marcus thought was a secure hold. Boxing is about hitting without being hit. Jiu-jitsu is about controlling your opponent's body so that their size and strength become irrelevant. You're not trying to hurt them. You're trying to make it impossible for them to hurt you. Master Chun observed the training session from across the room, occasionally offering quiet corrections to individual students. When he approached Marcus and Sophia, the old man's expression was thoughtful. Your previous training has created habits that will be difficult to change, he told Marcus. You rely too much on muscle tension and aggressive energy. In jiu-jitsu, we use relaxation and efficiency. Force meets force creates conflict. But yielding to force while redirecting it creates control. To demonstrate his point, Master Chin asked Marcus to grab his wrist as tightly as possible. Marcus wrapped his large hand around the old man's thin wrist and squeezed, using enough pressure to secure what he thought was an unbreakable grip. Master Chun barely moved, but somehow his wrist was suddenly free, and Marcus found himself off balance and vulnerable to a follow-up technique. The old man hadn't used force or speed. He had simply moved in a way that made Marcus's grip ineffective. You were trying to hold my wrist in place, Master Chin explained. But wrists are designed to move in many directions. When you grip tightly, you create rigidity in your own body that I can use against you. Watch. He demonstrated the technique slowly, showing how a small rotation of his wrist, combined with precise timing, had created the escape. It looked simple when broken down into individual movements, but Marcus could see that the timing and coordination required would take considerable practice to master. This is the foundation of all jiu-jitsu, Sophia added. Instead of fighting against your opponent's strength, you learn to work with it. When they push, you pull. When they pull, you push. When they resist in one direction, you attack in another. It becomes like a conversation between two bodies instead of a war. The class continued with basic submission techniques. Sophia showed Marcus how to apply a simple armbar, a technique designed to control an opponent by placing pressure on their elbow joint. The mechanics were straightforward, but applying the technique correctly required precise positioning and gradual pressure rather than sudden force. When they practiced the technique at slow speed, Marcus found it nearly impossible to escape once Sophia had established the proper position. His instinct was to use his strength to muscle his way out, but every time he tried, Sophia simply adjusted her position to maintain control. Don't fight the submission, she advised. When someone has you in a good position, fighting with strength just makes it worse. Instead, you need to address the technique systematically. Which part of your body is being controlled? How can you reduce that control? What options do you have for escape? This analytical approach to fighting was completely foreign to Marcus. His previous experience had been based on instinct, aggression, and overwhelming force. The idea of calmly analyzing a dangerous situation while it was happening seemed impossible. But as they continued practicing, he began to see the wisdom in Sophia's approach. When he stopped panicking and started thinking, he could identify small opportunities to improve his position. The escapes were difficult and required perfect timing, but they were possible if he approached them systematically. The most humbling part of the training session came when Sophia asked Miguel, the college student, to demonstrate the armbar technique on Marcus. Miguel was probably 20 years old, weighed maybe 160 pounds, and had been training for only 6 months. But when he applied the technique correctly, Marcus found himself just as helpless as he had been with Sophia. "This doesn't make sense," Marcus muttered as he tapped out for the 3rd time. "I outweigh him by almost 100 pounds. Weight only matters if you can apply it effectively," Masterchin observed. "In the position you are in, your weight is actually working against you. Miguel is using your body weight as part of the leverage system that makes the submission possible. The more you struggle, the more you help him." After 2 hours of training, Marcus was exhausted in a way he had never experienced before. His muscles weren't particularly tired, but his brain felt overloaded from trying to process so many new concepts and techniques. Every movement required conscious thought and careful execution, unlike the automatic responses his boxing training had developed. "How do you feel?" Sophia asked as they cooled down with more stretching. "Confused," Marcus admitted, "and humiliated. I've never felt so ineffective in a physical activity before." "That's normal," Sophia assured him. "Everyone goes through this phase. Your brain is trying to apply old patterns to new situations, and it doesn't work. Eventually, you'll develop new patterns that are specific to jiu-jitsu, and it will start to feel more natural." "How long does that take?" "Depends on how often you train and how well you absorb the lessons. Some people pick it up in a few months. Others take years. But everyone gets there eventually if they stick with it." Master Chin joined their conversation as other students began leaving for work or school. "The learning process is different for everyone," he said, "but I have observed that people with extensive experience in other fighting styles sometimes take longer because they must first unlearn their old habits before they can learn new ones." "Are you saying my boxing training is actually hurting me here?" "Not hurting, but creating obstacles," Master Chin clarified. "Boxing teaches excellent footwork, distance management, and striking techniques. But it also teaches you to maintain distance from your opponent, to keep your hands up for defense, and to generate power through linear movements. In jiu-jitsu, we work in close contact. We often want our hands free to grab and control, and we generate power through circular movements and leverage." Sophia nodded in agreement. "The good news is that your physical conditioning and athletic experience will help you once you start understanding the technical aspects. You're in great shape, you have good body awareness, and you understand the mental aspects of competition. Those advantages will become more apparent as you get comfortable with the new techniques. What should I focus on for next time? Marcus asked. Patience, Masterton replied immediately. You are accustomed to being successful quickly because your natural gifts have always been sufficient. Here, you will need to accept being a beginner and allow yourself to learn slowly and systematically. As Marcus changed back into his street clothes, he reflected on the morning's experiences. Every technique that had seemed simple when Sophia demonstrated it had become complex and difficult when he attempted it himself. His size and strength, which had been his greatest assets in boxing, seemed to work against him in this new environment. But he was also intrigued by the intellectual challenge of jiu-jitsu. Boxing was often compared to physical chess, but jiu-jitsu seemed even more strategic and systematic. Every position had multiple options, every technique had counters and counter-counters, and success required understanding not just what to do, but when and why to do it. Same time tomorrow? Sophia asked as they prepared to leave. Absolutely, Marcus replied. But I have a question. Last night, you said you've been training since you were 8 years old. How many people have you submitted who were bigger than me? Sophia laughed. Too many to count. Size matters less in jiu-jitsu than in almost any other physical activity. I've submitted college football players, professional athletes, and even some mixed martial arts fighters who thought they could rely on their strength. The beautiful thing about this art is that it gives smaller people the tools to neutralize size and strength advantages. And you really think someone like me can learn to do that? I know you can, Sophia said confidently. You have the physical tools and the competitive mindset. What you need to develop is the technical knowledge and the patience to apply it correctly. Give it 6 months of consistent training, and you'll be amazed at what you can accomplish. As Marcus rode his motorcycle home, he thought about Sophia's prediction. 6 months seemed like a long time to invest in something so foreign to his previous experience. But the demonstration from the night before had proven that there were aspects of fighting he had never even considered. If he was serious about being the best fighter he could be, he needed to understand all aspects of combat, not just the ones that favored his natural advantages. That evening, instead of his usual routine of weight training and heavy bag work, Marcus spent time researching jiu-jitsu online. He watched videos of competitions, read about the history of the art, and studied the biographies of famous practitioners. What he discovered surprised him. Many of the most successful jiu-jitsu competitors were not particularly large or physically imposing. They succeeded through technique, strategy, and in deep understanding of human anatomy and psychology. The art had been developed specifically to allow smaller, weaker people to defend themselves against larger, stronger attackers. But perhaps most interesting was learning about the mental and philosophical aspects of jiu-jitsu training. Unlike boxing, which emphasized dominance and aggression, jiu-jitsu taught humility, patience, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. These were qualities that Marcus realized he had never fully developed, despite his success in combat sports. Over the following weeks, Marcus maintained his regular training schedule for boxing while adding daily jiu-jitsu sessions at Dragon's Den Academy. The combination was exhausting, but he was determined to understand this new dimension of fighting that Sophia had revealed to him. Progress was slow and frustrating. Basic techniques that looked simple continued to elude him, and he found himself regularly submitted by training partners who had been practicing for only a few months. His ego, which Sophia had warned him to leave in the parking lot, took a daily beating as housewives and teenagers demonstrated their technical superiority. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. The movements that had felt awkward and unnatural started to become more fluid. He began to anticipate his opponent's attacks and respond with appropriate defenses. Most importantly, he started to understand the underlying principles that made the techniques work. The breakthrough came during his 4th week of training. Marcus was practicing with David, the retired businessman, when something clicked in his understanding of leverage and timing. Instead of trying to muscle his way out of a submission attempt, he relaxed, analyzed the position, and executed a perfect technical escape. Excellent. Master Chun called out from across the room. You are beginning to think like a jiu-jitsu player instead of boxer. That single moment of success opened the floodgates for Marcus's development. Once he stopped fighting against the techniques and started working with them, his natural athleticism and competitive drive became assets rather than obstacles. His progress accelerated rapidly as he internalized the fundamental concepts that made jiu-jitsu effective. By the end of his second month of training, Marcus could hold his own against more experienced students in his weight class. He was still regularly submitted by smaller, more technical practitioners, but he could see the mechanics of what they were doing and understand how to defend against it. More importantly, his approach to fighting in general had begun to evolve. The aggression and dominance that had characterized his boxing style remained, but they were now tempered by patience, strategy, and technical precision. He was becoming a more complete fighter, capable of adapting to different situations and opponents. The real test came when Sophia suggested that Marcus enter his first jiu-jitsu competition. The tournament would be divided by belt rank and weight class, ensuring that he would face opponents with similar experience levels. But the prospect of competing in an arena where his previous accomplishments meant nothing was both exciting and terrifying. Are you sure I'm ready? Marcus asked. I still get submitted regularly in training. Everyone gets submitted regularly in training, Sophia replied. That's how you learn. Competition is different because both people are trying their best to win, and you'll discover things about your abilities that you can't learn any other way. Master Chin agreed with Sophia's assessment. Competition reveals character, he said. In training, you can always tell yourself that you weren't trying your hardest or that you were working on something specific. In competition, there are no excuses. You either apply your techniques correctly or you fail. Both outcomes provide valuable learning opportunities. Marcus registered for the tournament, knowing that it would be unlike any competitive experience he had ever had. In boxing, he had always been the favorite, the intimidating presence that other fighters feared to face. In jiu-jitsu, he would be the inexperienced newcomer hoping to apply his limited knowledge against opponents who had been training longer and understood the intricacies of the art better than he did. The Michigan State Jiu-Jitsu Championships took place in a sports complex in Grand Rapids, 3 hours from Detroit. Marcus had competed in boxing matches before, but the atmosphere at a jiu-jitsu tournament was completely different. Instead of the rowdy, aggressive energy of underground boxing crowds, there was a sense of mutual respect and shared purpose among competitors and spectators. Families watched their children compete alongside adult athletes. Competitors from different schools warmly greeted each other, sharing techniques and offering encouragement. Even the officials seemed more like teachers and judges, taking time to explain rules and positioning to newer competitors. Sophia accompanied Marcus to the tournament, serving as his coach for the day. Master Chun had wanted to attend, but was recovering from a minor surgery, so he sent his blessings along with specific instructions about strategy and mindset. Remember, Sophia told Marcus as they checked in at the registration table, this is about testing your skills and learning from the experience. Winning is nice, but it's not the primary goal. Every match will teach you something new about jiu-jitsu and about yourself. Marcus nodded, but internally he struggled with Sophia's perspective. Winning had always been his primary goal in any competition. His entire identity was built around being undefeated, and the idea of entering a contest where learning was more important than victory felt strange and uncomfortable. The white belt heavyweight division had 8 competitors, meaning Marcus would need to win 3 matches to take first place. He studied his potential opponents during the warm-up period, noting their sizes, movement patterns, and apparent experience levels. His first opponent was Kevin Santos, a construction worker from Lansing who had been training for about a year. Kevin was roughly Marcus's size, but carried his weight differently, with the lean muscle mass of someone who performed physical labor for a living rather than the bulky development of a gym-trained athlete. "Remember your training," Sophia advised as Marcus prepared to step onto the mat. "Don't try to impose your boxing mentality on a jiu-jitsu match. Stay calm, think through each position, and look for opportunities to apply the techniques you've learned." The referee called both competitors to the center of the mat. Marcus and Kevin bumped fists and took their positions. At the referee's signal, the match began. Kevin immediately shot for a takedown, attempting to grab Marcus around the waist and drive him to the ground. Marcus's boxing instincts kicked in, and he tried to defend by backing away and creating distance. But Kevin persisted, eventually securing a grip and using his leverage advantage to take Marcus down. On the ground, Marcus found himself in exactly the type of position he had been practicing for the past 2 months. Kevin was attempting to advance to a more dominant position, but Marcus remembered Sophia's teachings about maintaining guard and creating space. Instead of panicking or trying to muscle his way up, he focused on technique and positioning. The match became a strategic battle of small movements and position changes. Kevin would gain a slight advantage, and Marcus would use his technical knowledge to neutralize it. Marcus would attempt a submission, and Kevin would defend with techniques that were slightly more polished due to his longer training time. With 30 seconds remaining in the 6-minute match, Marcus saw an opening for the armbar that he had practiced hundreds of times with Sophia. Kevin had overcommit to a position change, leaving his arm exposed. Marcus smoothly transitioned to the submission position and applied the technique with the patience and precision that Master Chun had taught him. Kevin fought the submission for several seconds before realizing he was caught cleanly. He tapped out with 15 seconds remaining on the clock, and Marcus had won his first jiu-jitsu competition match. "Excellent," Sophia exclaimed as Marcus left the mat. "You stayed calm, you used your techniques correctly, and you didn't try to force anything. That was beautiful jiu-jitsu." Marcus felt a surge of satisfaction that was different from his usual post-victory emotions. In boxing, his wins had come from imposing his will on opponents through superior physical attributes. This victory felt earned through knowledge and skill rather than natural advantages. His second match was against Tommy Chun, no relation to Master Chun, who had been training for 8 months. Tommy was smaller than Marcus, probably around 200 pounds, but he moved with the fluid confidence of someone who had fully internalized the basic techniques. This match proved more challenging than the first. Tommy's technical knowledge was more advanced than Kevin's, and he showed no intimidation at facing a larger opponent. He attacked Marcus's legs immediately, attempting to take him down with techniques that Marcus had only recently learned to defend. The match went the full 6 minutes without a submission, and the judges awarded the victory to Tommy based on scoring criteria that Marcus didn't fully understand. Sophia explained that Tommy had controlled the majority of the match, advancing to better positions and attempting more submissions even though he hadn't been able to finish any of them. "That's exactly what you needed," Sophia told him. "Tommy showed you what high-level white belt jiu-jitsu looks like. Did you notice how he never stopped moving, never let you get comfortable in any position? That's the kind of constant pressure and technical advancement you need to develop." Marcus was initially disappointed by the loss, his first defeat in any combat sport since childhood. But as he reflected on the match, he realized that he had learned more in those 6 minutes than in weeks of training. Tommy had exposed gaps in his knowledge and technique that he could now work to address. The tournament format included a consolation bracket for competitors who had lost one match, so Marcus still had the opportunity to compete again. His next opponent in the consolation bracket was Robert Kim, a software engineer who had been training for about the same amount of time as Marcus. This match felt like a true test of everything Marcus had learned. Robert's technical knowledge was similar to Marcus's, but he was smaller and relied more heavily on speed and agility. The match became a strategic chess game, with each competitor trying to implement their game plan while disrupting their opponents. Marcus used his size advantage more effectively in this match, but in a technical way rather than through brute force. He controlled the pace of the match, maintained dominant positions when he achieved them, and looked for submission opportunities that fit his body type and skill level. The match ended when Marcus secured a rear naked choke, a submission that Sophia had taught him was particularly effective for larger competitors. Robert fought the submission valiantly, but was eventually forced to tap out with 2 minutes remaining. "Now that was the match I wanted to see," Sophia said afterward. "You used your physical advantages, but within a technical framework. You didn't abandon your jiu-jitsu training to rely on strength, but you also didn't ignore the tools that your size and conditioning give you." Marcus's final match of the day was against Mike Wilson, an experienced white belt who had been training for over a year and had competed in several tournaments. Mike was technically the most advanced opponent Marcus had faced, and the match would determine third place in the division. From the opening moments, Mike demonstrated why experience mattered in jiu-jitsu. His movements were economical and purposeful, and he seemed to anticipate Marcus's attacks before they fully developed. He controlled the pace of the match and consistently worked toward dominant positions. But Marcus had learned something important from his earlier matches. Instead of becoming frustrated or trying to force techniques that weren't available, he focused on defense and waited for opportunities. His boxing experience had taught him patience in different contexts, and he was able to adapt those mental skills to jiu-jitsu competition. The opportunity came in the 4th minute when Mike attempted a complex transition that required perfect timing and positioning. Marcus recognized the mistake immediately and countered with a sweep that reversed their positions. Suddenly, he was in the dominant position with Mike defending underneath. Marcus didn't waste the opportunity. He systematically advanced his position, used his weight and leverage advantages intelligently, and eventually secured a submission that ended the match. The victory gave him 3rd place in his first jiu-jitsu tournament, a result that exceeded his expectations when the day began. "I'm proud of you," Sophia said as they prepared to leave the tournament. "Not because of your placement, but because of how you competed. You showed respect for your opponents, you applied your techniques correctly under pressure, and you learned something from every match." During the drive back to Detroit, Marcus reflected on the day's experiences. The tournament had been unlike any competitive event he had ever participated in. The emphasis on learning and improvement rather than just winning had created an atmosphere where losing a match didn't feel like personal failure, but rather like an educational opportunity. More importantly, the tournament had shown him how much his understanding of fighting had evolved since that night outside Jimmy's underground arena. The techniques Sophia had taught him were not just interesting curiosities. They were practical tools that could be applied successfully in competitive situations. "What did you learn today?" Sophia asked as they neared Detroit. "That jiu-jitsu isn't just a martial art," Marcus replied. "It's a different way of thinking about problems. In boxing, I learned to solve problems with force and aggression. In jiu-jitsu, you solve problems with knowledge and technique. Both approaches have their place, but combining them makes you more complete. And how do you feel about losing that match to Tommy?" Marcus considered the question carefully. 6 months ago, losing any fight would have been devastating to me. Today, losing to Tommy felt like getting a preview of where my training could take me if I stick with it. He showed me possibilities I hadn't even considered. Sophia smiled. "That's the mindset that will allow you to continue improving. The moment you think you know everything is the moment your development stops." Over the following months, Marcus continued training at Dragon's Den Academy while maintaining his boxing career. The combination of arts made him a more versatile and dangerous fighter in all contexts. His boxing became more technical and strategic as he applied jiu-jitsu concepts of timing and leverage to his striking. His jiu-jitsu improved rapidly as his athletic foundation and competitive experience accelerated his learning curve. The real test came 6 months after Marcus's first tournament, when Sophia suggested he enter an intermediate-level mixed martial arts competition. The event would allow both striking and grappling, creating an environment where Marcus could integrate all of his skills. "Are you sure I'm ready for that level?" Marcus asked. MMA fighters train specifically for the combination of arts. "I'm still learning how to blend everything together." "There's only one way to find out," Sophia replied. "And you won't truly understand how to integrate your skills until you test them in a situation where everything is allowed." Master Chun, who had fully recovered from his surgery and resumed teaching, supported Sophia's recommendation. "Integration of knowledge is the highest form of martial arts training," he said. "You have developed good skills in separate areas. Now you must learn to use them as a unified system." The MMA competition was scheduled for the following month, giving Marcus time to adjust his training routine. He worked with Sophia on transitioning between striking and grappling ranges, practiced defending takedowns while setting up boxing combinations, and learned to use jiu-jitsu techniques to control opponents who were trying to strike. The training was exhausting and humbling. Every session revealed new aspects of fighting that Marcus had never considered. The timing required to switch between different fighting ranges was incredibly precise, and the strategic decisions about when to engage on the feet versus when to take the fight to the ground were complex and situational. But Marcus also discovered that his combination of skills was unusual and potentially very effective. Most MMA fighters specialized in one area and developed adequate skills in others. Marcus's high-level boxing, combined with his rapidly improving jiu-jitsu, created problems for opponents who didn't know how to prepare for that combination. The competition itself took place at a casino in Windsor, Ontario, just across the border from Detroit. The venue was more professional than the underground boxing events Marcus was used to, with proper lighting, medical staff, and regulated safety equipment. Marcus's opponent was Jake Morrison, a local favorite who had been training MMA for 3 years and had a record of 8 wins and 2 losses. Jake was a well-rounded fighter who specialized in wrestling and ground control with adequate striking skills and good cardio conditioning. "This is what everything has been leading to," Sophia told Marcus as they prepared in the locker room before the fight. "You've learned to box at an elite level, and you've learned to do jiu-jitsu correctly. Now you get to see if you can use both skills in the same fight." The fight began with both men feeling each other out on their feet. Marcus's boxing superiority was immediately apparent as he landed several clean shots while avoiding Jake's takedown attempts. But Jake was persistent and experienced, and he eventually secured a takedown that brought the fight to the ground. On the ground, Marcus found himself in exactly the type of position he had been practicing for the past 8 months. Jake was attempting to control him with wrestling techniques, but Marcus used his jiu-jitsu knowledge to neutralize Jake's advantages and look for submission opportunities. The first round ended with Marcus controlling the ground position and landing several strikes from the top. The second round saw Jake attempt a more aggressive striking approach, but Marcus's boxing skills allowed him to dominate the stand-up exchanges while defending takedowns more effectively. In the third and final round, Marcus was able to take Jake down with a technique that combined his boxing footwork with a jiu-jitsu sweep. Once on the ground in the dominant position, Marcus used his knowledge of submissions and ground control to systematically break down Jake's defenses. The fight ended with Marcus securing a rear naked choke submission with 90 seconds remaining in the final round. Jake fought the submission desperately, but was eventually forced to tap out, giving Marcus a victory in his first mixed martial arts competition. "That was beautiful," Sophia said afterward. "You used every skill you've developed, and you did it intelligently. Your boxing set up your jiu-jitsu, and your jiu-jitsu complemented your boxing. That's what martial arts integration is supposed to look like." As Marcus left the venue that night, he thought about the journey that had brought him to this point. 9 months earlier, he had been a one-dimensional fighter who relied primarily on physical advantages and conventional boxing skills. The encounter with Sophia had forced him to confront the limitations of that approach and open his mind to new possibilities. The process of learning jiu-jitsu had been humbling and challenging in ways that boxing had never been. It had required him to develop patience, technical precision, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. But it had also made him a more complete fighter and, he realized, a more complete person. The underground boxing scene that had made Marcus famous still existed, but he found himself less interested in that world. The violence without purpose, the emphasis on intimidation over skill, and the limited scope of what constituted good fighting all seemed crude and incomplete compared to what he had discovered through proper martial arts training. Instead, Marcus began teaching at Dragon's Den Academy, sharing his boxing knowledge with jiu-jitsu students while continuing to develop his own skills. He discovered that teaching forced him to understand techniques at a deeper level and helped him integrate his various skills more effectively. "You have become what every martial artist should aspire to be," Master Chen told him one evening after class. "You are skilled but not arrogant. You are confident but still learning. You are strong but also wise. Most importantly, you understand that true strength comes not from dominating others, but from mastering yourself." Sophia, who had become both his training partner and close friend, agreed with her grandfather's assessment. "When I first met you, you were a very good fighter who happened to be ignorant about certain aspects of fighting. Now you're a martial artist who understands that fighting is just one application of much deeper principles." "What do you mean by that?" Marcus asked. "The patience you learned in jiu-jitsu makes you a better teacher. The humility you develop through being submitted by smaller opponents makes you a better leader. The strategic thinking you developed through studying techniques makes you a better problem solver in all areas of life. The martial arts didn't just make you a better fighter, they made you a better person." Looking back, Marcus could see the truth in Sophia's observation. The lessons he had learned on the mats at Dragon's Den Academy had applications far beyond fighting. The ability to remain calm under pressure served him well in business negotiations. The patience he had developed through learning complex techniques helped him in his personal relationships. The humility he had gained through regular submission defeats made him more open to learning in all areas of his life. Most importantly, Marcus had learned that true mastery was not about being the toughest or strongest person in the room. It was about continuously improving, helping others improve, and understanding that there was always more to learn. The undefeated warrior had discovered that the greatest victories came not from defeating others, but from the ongoing process of defeating his own limitations and assumptions. The encounter with Sophia outside Jimmy's underground arena had lasted only 3 seconds, but it had changed the entire trajectory of Marcus's life. In those 3 seconds, everything he thought he knew about fighting, about himself, and about what it meant to be strong had been challenged and ultimately transformed. And perhaps most importantly, Marcus had learned that the toughest warriors were not always the ones who looked the most intimidating. Sometimes they were quiet women in parking lots who carried themselves with the confidence that came from truly understanding their art. Sometimes strength came in packages that defied expectations, and the greatest lessons came from teachers who appeared when you least expected them and showed you possibilities you had never imagined.